I thought grief would be the hardest part, but I was wrong. The hardest part was the silence, the kind that happens when the people who swore they loved you simply do not show up. I stared at 3 empty chairs while a voicemail proved they were not running late. They were already dividing what they thought I would inherit. What I found after the funeral did not just break my heart, it rewrote my entire life. My name is Quinn Reyes, and I am 33 years old. I sat in the front row of the most beautiful, terrible room I had ever seen, staring at a mahogany casket that seemed far too large for the life it contained. The air smelled of lilies and floor wax, that distinct, suffocating perfume of finality that funeral homes seem to pump through the vents. I smoothed the fabric of my black dress over my knees, my hands trembling just enough to be noticeable. I clamped them together, forcing stillness into my body, because if I let myself shake, I was afraid I would shatter into 1,000 pieces right there on the carpet. But I was not looking at the casket. I could not bring myself to look at the casket. Not yet. Instead, my eyes were fixed on the 3 chairs to my immediate right. They were padded folding chairs, identical to mine, but distinguished by elegant white cardstock signs draped over the backs in gold lettering. Reserved for Mother, reserved for Father, reserved for Brianna. They were empty. The chapel was full behind me. I could feel the heat of 300 bodies, the collective, rhythmic breathing of a crowd trying to be respectful. The room was a sea of navy blue uniforms, the dress blues of the Havenbrook Fire and Rescue Department. My husband, Logan, had been one of them. They had shown up. Every single off-duty firefighter, paramedic, and dispatcher had squeezed into the pews, standing shoulder to shoulder along the back walls, overflowing into the lobby. They were here, but the 3 people who shared my blood, and the one person who swore she was my soulmate in friendship, were not. I checked my watch. It was 10 o'clock exactly. The service was scheduled to begin at 10 o'clock. I looked at the chaplain standing by the podium. He was a kind man with silver hair and a patient face, but I could see him shifting his weight from foot to foot. He glanced at me, then at the empty chairs, his eyebrows pulling together in a silent question. Beside the casket, the honor guards stood like statues, their gloved hands resting on their ceremonial axes. They were sweating under the lights. They had been standing at attention for 20 minutes already. I could not ask them to wait any longer. It would be an insult to Logan. I pulled my phone from my clutch one last time, shielding the screen from the view of the people behind me. There was a single text message from Brianna Voss. It had come in 12 minutes ago. Work emergency. Total nightmare here. I cannot leave. So sorry. Quinn, love you. I stared at the words. Brianna worked in marketing for a mid-sized tech firm. She did not perform brain surgery. She did not put out fires. She did not save lives. A work emergency for her meant a slide deck was formatted incorrectly, or a client was unhappy with a font choice. She had missed the funeral of her best friend's husband for a font choice. I navigated to my voicemail. There was one new message from my mother, time-stamped 30 minutes ago. I held the phone up to my ear, keeping the volume low. Quinn, my mother's voice said. It was crisp, clear. There was no background noise, no sound of traffic or wind. We are having car trouble. The engine just would not turn over. We are waiting on a tow truck, but it does not look like we will make it in time for the start. Go ahead without us. We will be there when we can. I ended the call and lowered the phone. The lie was so thin it was transparent. My father drove a brand new sedan, leased 3 months ago. He was obsessive about maintenance, and even if the car had failed, they lived 20 minutes away. Uber existed, taxis existed, neighbors existed. If your daughter is burying her husband, you walk if you have to, you crawl. But what chilled me the most was the tone. There was no panic in her voice, no breathless desperation. She sounded like she was canceling a dentist appointment or explaining why she was late for brunch. It was tidy. It was an excuse designed to be filed away and forgotten. They were not coming. I felt a physical wave of nausea roll through me. Hot and acidic, I swallowed it down. I stood up, my legs feeling like they were made of lead, and I nodded to the chaplain. Please begin, I whispered. He nodded back, relieved, and stepped to the microphone. The feedback whine pierced the room for a split second before settling. We are gathered here today to honor the life and service of Logan Hale, he began. I sat back down, alone in the front row. That was when I heard the whispers. The acoustics in the room were excellent, designed to carry the softest prayer to the back row, which unfortunately meant they carried the softest gossip to the front. Is she alone? A woman's voice murmured behind me. I thought her parents were in town. Another whispered back. That is the best friend's seat. Isn't it empty? That is tragic, to go through this by yourself. The words hit the back of my neck like little stones. They were not trying to be cruel. They were confused. In their world, in the world of the firefighters sitting behind me, you showed up. You showed up when the bells rang. You showed up when the roof collapsed. And you definitely showed up when a brother went down. The fact that my family was absent was a glitch in their reality. It made me look like a pariah. It made me look like something was wrong with me, that I was so unlovable that even on the worst day of my life, my own mother could not be bothered to witness it. The service blurred. People spoke. The fire chief told a story about Logan rescuing a cat, which was a cliché, except it had actually happened and Logan had been allergic to cats. Sneezing the entire way down the ladder, people laughed. I smiled, but my face felt like a mask made of dried clay. Then it was my turn. The chaplain invited me up. Logan's wife, Quinn, would like to share a few words. I stood up. The walk to the podium was only 10 feet, but it felt like miles. I could feel 300 pairs of eyes on me, and 3 empty chairs screaming at me from the peripheral vision. I gripped the wooden edges of the podium so hard my knuckles turned white. I looked out at the room. I saw the faces of Logan's crew. I saw their tears. I saw genuine, raw grief on the faces of men who broke down doors for a living. Then I looked at the 3 empty seats in the front row. I had written a speech. It was on a piece of paper in my hand. It was about Logan's kindness, his humor, the way he made coffee in the morning. But as I looked at those reserved signs, the anger that had been simmering under my grief flared up, bright and hot. I folded the paper and put it away. Logan used to tell me that words are cheap, I said. My voice was steady. I was surprised by how strong it sounded. He was a man of action. If he said he would be there, he was there. If he said he had your back, you never had to turn around to check, because you knew. I paused. The room was dead silent. We talk a lot about love in times like this, I continued, my eyes locking onto the empty chair marked Mother. We talk about it like it is a feeling, like it is a sentiment you write in a card, but the last few months taught me something different. I took a breath. Love is not a promise. It is not a text message sent 12 minutes before a deadline. It is not a voicemail explaining why it is inconvenient to be here. I saw a few people in the second row shift uncomfortably. They knew. Love is presence, I said, and I let the words hang there, heavy and undeniable. Love is showing up. It is sitting in the chair. It is holding the hand. It is being the witness to someone's pain so they do not have to carry it alone. Logan loved me. I know that. Not because he said it, but because he never once left me wondering if he would show up. I looked down at my hands. And for those of you who are here, who showed up today, thank you. You are the love he left behind. I stepped down. The silence that followed was different now. It was not awkward. It was electric. I had acknowledged the elephant in the room. I had pointed a finger at the ghosts in the front row. The rest of the service was a haze of ritual, the final bell ceremony. 3 rings, 3 times tore a hole in my chest. The bagpipes played Amazing Grace, a sound so mournful it felt like it was vibrating in my bones. Then came the flag presentation. The honor guard folded the American flag that had draped the casket. Their movements were precise, sharp, mechanical snaps of fabric, 13 folds, a triangle of blue stars. The chief approached me. He knelt on one knee in front of me, his uniform creaking. He held the flag out with both hands. On behalf of a grateful community and the Havenbrook Fire Department, please accept this flag as a symbol of our appreciation for your husband's honorable and faithful service. I took the flag. It was dense, heavy, and tight. I pulled it into my chest, hugging it like it was the only solid thing left in the universe. As the crowd began to disperse, filing past me to offer condolences, a woman stepped out of the line. She was tall, with sharp features and dark hair that had started to gray at the temples. She was wearing a simple black coat, and she looked out of place among the uniforms and the locals. She stopped in front of me. She did not hug me. She just looked at me with an intensity that made me pause, and then I saw it. She had Logan's eyes, the same shape, the same flecks of green in the brown. It was like looking at a ghost. "I am sorry for your loss," she said. Her voice was low, raspy. "I just wanted you to know he talked about you. He talked about you like you were the safest place on earth." She did not say who she was. She did not explain how she knew him. Before I could ask, before I could even find the breath to speak, she turned and disappeared into the crowd, vanishing toward the exit. I stood there, clutching the flag, the phrase echoing in my mind, the safest place on earth. I eventually made it to the car. The drive home was a blur of gray highway and overcast sky. I drove Logan's truck. I could not bear to drive my own car yet. The truck still smelled like him-old coffee, sanitizer, and peppermint gum. When I pulled into the driveway of our house in Maple Hollow, the silence of the property hit me harder than the noise of the funeral. The house looked the same. The porch light was still on from the morning. The mail was in the box. The world had kept turning while my life had stopped. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The air was stale. The living room was exactly as we had left it. Medical equipment pushed to the corner, a stack of bills on the counter, a blanket folded on the sofa where I had slept for the last 3 weeks. I placed the folded flag on the mantel above the fireplace. I stood back and looked at it. A triangle of blue, a life folded up into geometry. And then, the realization hit me. It was not a slow dawn. It was a lightning strike. I thought about the empty chairs. I thought about the excuses. And then my mind replayed the last month. My mother. 2 days after the diagnosis. "Quinn, you need to make sure you know where all the accounts are. Does he have a pension?" My father, calling while I was at the pharmacy, picking up morphine. "The house market is peaking. Honey, if you sell now, you could get a good price. You do not want to be burdened with that mortgage alone." Brianna, sitting at my kitchen table, sipping the coffee I made her while Logan slept in the next room. "Life insurance is tricky. Quinn, you have to file fast. How much is the policy for, again, 500,000 or more?" They had not asked how he was feeling. They had not asked if I was eating. They had not asked if we needed someone to mow the lawn. Every conversation had been a calculation. Every check-in had been an audit. They were not there today because there was nothing left to gain from performing sadness. They were probably assuming I was too broken to notice. They thought the grieving widow would be so consumed by loss that she would be blind to the math. They were wrong. I felt a coldness settle over me. It was not the coldness of grief. It was something sharper. It was the clarity of winter. I walked to the kitchen. I needed water. I needed to wash the taste of the funeral out of my mouth. As I reached for a glass in the cabinet, my hip bumped against the junk drawer, the one Logan was always organizing. It rattled. I stopped. I opened the drawer. It was tidy, just as he kept it. Batteries, tape, screwdrivers. But something was stuck to the underside of the drawer above it. I could feel the crinkle of paper when I pulled the drawer out fully. I reached up and peeled a piece of notebook paper off the bottom of the countertop overhang. It had been taped there with blue painter's tape. I unfolded it. It was Logan's handwriting. The scrawl was shaky, written recently. Then, written when his hands had started to fail him. "Quinn, if you are reading this, I am gone. And if I know my family and yours, you are probably standing in this kitchen wondering why you feel so alone. If they did not show up today, do not chase them. Do not call them. Do not ask them why. They showed you who they are. Believe them. Go to the closet in the guest room. Check the lockbox. The code is the date we met. I moved some things. I protected us. I love you. You were my home. L. I stared at the note. My hands were shaking again. But not from sorrow this time. He had known. He had seen it coming. While I was busy trying to keep him alive, he had been watching them circle like vultures. I looked at the date on the top of the note. He had written it 3 weeks ago, the same day Brianna had come over to help me clean the office. I lowered the paper. The house was quiet, but the silence no longer felt empty. It felt like a held breath. It felt like the calm before a storm. I turned my gaze toward the hallway that led to the guest room. They thought I was weak. They thought I was a victim. They thought they could skip the funeral and wait for the check. I folded the note and slipped it into my pocket. I was not just a widow anymore. I was Logan Hale's wife, and I had a lockbox to open. I held the folded note in my hand, the paper growing warm against my palm, standing there in the hallway, staring at the closed door of the guest room. The silence of the house began to shift. It ceased to be the suffocating quiet of a funeral aftermath and transformed into the echo of a memory, pulling me back to a time before the silence, before the sickness, and before the empty chairs. I closed my eyes and allowed myself to be transported back 5 years. The first time I met Logan Hale, I almost scalded him with a 16-ounce cup of terrible hospital coffee. It was 4 a.m. at Cedar Ridge Medical Center. I was finishing a double shift in critical care support, a job that consisted mostly of managing chaos, soothing terrified relatives, and pretending I was not exhausted enough to collapse. I was walking blindly around the corner near the ambulance bay, staring at my clipboard, desperate for the caffeine in my hand to kick in. I turned the corner too sharp and collided with a wall of navy blue fire-retardant cotton. The lid of my cup popped off. The coffee, which was dangerously hot, splashed all over the chest of a man who was clearly in the middle of a shift. I gasped, dropping the clipboard. The liquid soaked into his duty jacket, right over the embroidered patch that read, Havenbrook Fire and Rescue. "Oh my God," I stammered, my hands hovering uselessly in the air. "I am so sorry. I am so clumsy. Let me get you some paper towels." I expected him to snap. I was used to people snapping. Doctors snapped when their charts were late. Families snapped when the news was bad. Fatigue makes people sharp and mean. And at 4 a.m, nobody is at their best. But he did not snap. A deep rumbling laugh came from the chest I had just vandalized. "It is okay," he said. His voice was gravelly, tired, and incredibly warm. I looked up. He was tall, with messy dark hair that had been flattened by a helmet or a cap, and eyes that held a surprising amount of light for someone standing in a fluorescent-lit hospital hallway before dawn. He looked down at the spreading stain on his jacket, then back at me, a lopsided grin pulling at the corner of his mouth. "Honestly," he said, "that is the kindest assault I have had all week. At least it smells like hazelnut." I felt the heat rush to my cheeks, but for the first time in 12 hours, my shoulders dropped. "It is actually French vanilla," I corrected him, "and I owe you a dry cleaning bill." "I will settle for a fresh cup," he countered. "I am Logan." "Quinn," I said. We ended up in the cafeteria 10 minutes later. It was not a date. It was just 2 exhausted people existing in the same space, seeking refuge from the demands of the night. We sat at a wobbly laminate table, drinking fresh coffee that tasted slightly like burnt plastic, and we talked. We did not talk about the weather or sports. When you work in emergency services or critical care, you skip the small talk because you know how fragile time is. We talked about the shift. He told me about the car accident he had just cleared on the interstate, describing the technical difficulty of the extraction without focusing on the gore. I told him about the patient in room 3 who was waiting for a transplant that might never come. I watched his hands as he spoke. They were large, capable hands, scarred with little nicks and burns from his work. He didn't fidget. He held his cup with a stillness that felt grounding. "You carry it home, don't you?" he asked suddenly, looking right at me. Carry what? The weight, he said. The invisible weight. You walk out of here. You swipe your badge. But you do not really leave. You worry about them in the car. You worry about them in the shower. I stopped breathing for a second. Nobody had ever named it so accurately before. My parents always told me I worked too hard, or that I was too sensitive. Brianna usually told me I needed a spa day, but Logan saw the specific, heavy architecture of the burden. Yeah, I whispered. I do. Me too, he said. He reached across the table and just tapped the back of my hand with his finger. A tiny gesture, but it sent a shockwave through me. It is easier if you have someone to help you put it down. That was the beginning. Our first real date happened 3 days later. It was not fancy. Neither of us had the energy or the desire for tablecloths and wine lists. We went to a 24-hour diner on the edge of town, a place with red vinyl booths that were patched with duct tape and a neon sign that buzzed like an angry hornet. We ordered greasy fries, milkshakes, and breakfast sandwiches at 8 at night. I remember looking at him across the table, watching him dip a fry into a mixture of ketchup and mayonnaise, and feeling a sense of familiarity that made no sense. It felt like I had known him for 10 years, not 3 days. There was no posturing. I did not have to suck in my stomach or pretend to be more interesting than I was. I was just Quinn, and he was just Logan, and that was enough. He told me about his childhood, about growing up with a father who worked the assembly line and a mother who taught piano. He talked about why he joined the department not for the glory, but because he liked the idea of being the person who shows up when everyone else is running away. It is simple math for me, he said, wiping his mouth with a paper napkin. People break. Someone has to help put them back together. I am good with tools. I fell in love with him somewhere between the second milkshake and the check. It wasn't a dramatic fall. It was a settling. It was the feeling of finally finding a place to rest. 18 months later, he proposed. He did not do it at a fancy restaurant or on a jumbotron at a baseball game. He drove me up to the lookout point above the river, a quiet gravel turnout where the teenagers usually went to park. But on a Tuesday night, it was empty. It was November. The air was crisp and smelled of dried leaves and wood smoke from the houses in the valley below. We sat on the tailgate of his truck, wrapped in a thick wool blanket, looking out at the city lights. They twinkled in the distance, a sprawling grid of gold and amber that looked like a promise of life continuing. No matter what. Logan turned to me. His face was shadowed, but I could see the seriousness in his eyes. He took my hand, his palm rough and warm against my cold skin. I have been thinking, he started, his voice a little tight. That is dangerous, I teased, bumping his shoulder with mine. He did not smile. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, velvet box. It was worn at the corners. My breath hitched. He opened it. Inside was a ring. It was not a massive rock that would blind you in the sunlight. It was a gold band with a modest, clear diamond set deep into the metal. It looked vintage because it was... This was my grandmother's, he said softly. She wore it for 50 years. It survived the Depression, a war, and raising 4 boys. He looked at me, and his vulnerability was so open it made my chest ache. I do not have a brand name life. Quinn, he said. I am a civil servant. I am never going to be rich. I cannot promise you yachts or Paris every spring, but I have a loyal life. I have a heart that will not quit on you. And if you take this, I promise you will never have to face the dark alone again. I did not hesitate. I did not think about finances or stability or what my mother would say. I just nodded, tears spilling over my lashes before I could stop them. Yes, I choked out. Yes, Logan, please. He slid the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting in that box for 50 years just for my hand. When we told my parents, the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. We were at their house for Sunday dinner. The roast beef was dry, and the conversation was drier. I showed my mother the ring, beaming, expecting her to at least pretend to be happy. She took my hand, adjusted her reading glasses, and peered at the diamond. "It is quaint," she said. That was her word for anything she found insufficient. "Is it an heirloom, or just second-hand?" "It was his grandmother's," I said, pulling my hand back. My father did not even look at the ring. He looked at Logan. "So, Logan, fire and rescue, that is a city job, correct?" "Yes, sir," Logan said, sitting up straighter. "And the pay scale?" my father asked, cutting into his meat. "I know the benefits are decent, but the base salary is capped, isn't it? Have you thought about how you will support a family on a municipal wage in this economy?" "Dad," I warned, "I am just asking practical questions." "Quinn," my father said, waving his fork, "love is fine, but love does not pay the mortgage. You are a smart girl. You have a career. We just want to make sure you are not anchoring yourself to something stagnant." Logan did not get angry. He placed his napkin on his lap and looked my father in the eye. "I make enough to build a life, sir, and I have a spotless record. I work hard. Quinn will never go without." "We will see," my father said, and that was the closest he ever came to a blessing. Brianna was different, but in a way that was almost worse. I met her for lunch the week after the engagement. I was floating, happy, eager to share my joy with my best friend. I showed her the ring. "Oh, wow," she said, her voice pitching up an octave. "It is so sweet." She took a sip of her iced tea, her eyes scanning the ring again. "It is very modest, very you, I guess." "I love it," I said defensively. "It has history." "Totally," she said. "And Logan is great, really. He is so earthy, real salt of the earth kind of guy." She leaned in, lowering her voice as if she were sharing a secret. "I have to admit, though, I was a little surprised. I just thought you would end up with someone bigger." "Bigger?" I asked. "You mean taller? He is 6'1". "No," she laughed, waving a hand. "I mean bigger, a doctor, or a lawyer, someone with a bit more ambition. You know, you have always been so driven. I just pictured you with a power couple dynamic. But hey, if you are happy being a firefighter's wife, that is all that matters." The way she said firefighter's wife sounded like she was saying maid. It was a label she clearly thought was beneath me, but I did not care. I looked at the ring on my finger, the gold catching the light of the cafe. I thought about the way Logan looked at me. I thought about the way he held me when I came home from a shift where I had lost a patient. How he would just wrap his arms around me and let me cry until I was empty, never asking me to fix it or cheer up. I married him 6 months later. We got married in a small chapel near the park. My parents sat in the front row with tight smiles, looking like they were attending a tax audit rather than a wedding. Brianna was my maid of honor, looking stunning and making sure everyone knew she had organized the bridal shower single-handedly. But when the doors opened and I saw Logan standing at the end of the aisle, everything else faded. He was wearing his dress blues, the same uniform he was wearing in the casket earlier today. He stood tall, his hands clasped in front of him. And when he saw me, his face broke open. He looked at me like I was the only person in the world, like I was the rescue he had been waiting for his entire life. Walking toward him did not feel like walking into a trap, or a bad investment, or a small life. It felt like exhaling. I had been holding my breath for 30 years trying to please my parents, trying to impress Brianna, trying to be perfect and successful and worthy, but standing there with Logan, holding his rough, scarred hands. I realized I did not have to be any of those things. I just had to be there. He was my safe harbor, and I was his. I opened my eyes, pulling myself back to the present. The hallway was dark now. The memory was sharp and bright, a diamond in the rough, but it made the reality of the empty house cut deeper. They had judged him. They had belittled him. They had looked at our love and calculated its net worth and found it lacking. But Logan had known what real value was. I gripped the note tighter. feeling the edge of the paper bite into my skin. He had given me a loyal life, and now I had to be loyal to his memory. I turned the handle of the guest room door. It was time to find the lockbox. It was time to see what my husband, the man who saved people for a living, had done to save me. The house in Maple Hollow was not a castle. It was a 1970s split level with peeling yellow siding, a porch railing that wobbled if you breathed on it too hard, and a colony of overgrown azaleas that looked like they were trying to swallow the front steps. But when Logan and I signed the papers, borrowing a pen from the title agent because our hands were shaking with excitement, it felt like we were purchasing a kingdom. We moved in during a rainstorm in early April. We had very little furniture, just a bed, a lumpy sofa from Logan's bachelor apartment, and a kitchen table I had salvaged from a thrift store. For the first month, our dinner ritual was strictly survival mode. We would sit cross-legged on the living room floor, surrounded by drop cloths and paint cans, eating sesame chicken out of white cardboard cartons while debating the merits of eggshell versus satin finish. There is a specific kind of intimacy found in renovation. It is the intimacy of seeing your partner covered in drywall dust, hair matted with sweat, cursing at a plumbing fixture that refuses to thread, and loving them more for it. We sanded the hardwood floors ourselves to save money. I remember the hum of the industrial sander, the way the vibration made my arms numb for hours afterward, and the way Logan would look at me through his safety goggles, giving me a thumbs up that promised we were building something permanent. We talked about children, but always in the abstract tense of someday. We painted the spare room a neutral sage green, telling ourselves it was a guest room, but we both knew what we were really imagining. We wanted a few years first. We wanted time to just be Quinn and Logan, to pay down the mortgage, to take a vacation that did not involve a power drill. We were greedy for time. Assuming the supply was infinite, our social circle naturally tightened around the house, Logan's station family, the crew from Engine 4 and Rescue 2, adopted the property as a collective project. They showed up on weekends without being asked, parking their trucks along the curb, bringing 6-packs of beer and tool belts. They rewired the garage, they fixed the sagging gutter, they ate us out of house and home, laughing loudly in the backyard until the sun went down. It was a chaotic, loud, wonderful community. My parents, however, treated Maple Hollow like a crime scene. Their visits were infrequent and stiff. When they did come over, they did not offer to pick up a paintbrush. They walked through the rooms with their hands clasped behind their backs, looking at the crown molding with critical eyes. "It is a lot of work," my mother said one Sunday, running a finger over a windowsill I had just painted. "Are you sure the foundation is sound? Old houses are money pits. Quinn, you do not want to sink your savings into a sinking ship. The foundation is fine." "Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "We had it inspected." "And the commute," my father added, looking out the window at the quiet, tree-lined street. "It is 40 minutes to the city. That is a lot of gas money, a lot of wear and tear on the vehicles." Everything they said was technically a concern, but the tone was all wrong. It was not protective. It was corrosive. They made our joy feel irresponsible. Brianna was different. She visited often, driving her least luxury sedan into our gravel driveway, usually bringing a bottle of wine that cost more than our weekly grocery budget. She played the part of the supportive best friend perfectly. She looked and awed over the paint colors. She bought us a housewarming gift, a heavy crystal vase that looked ridiculous on our laminate countertops. But looking back, her interest had a peculiar precision to it. She learned the house. She did not just visit. She memorized. She knew exactly which floorboard creaked in the hallway. She knew that the deadbolt on the back door stuck if you did not pull the handle up and to the left. One evening, while Logan was grilling burgers in the back, Brianna wandered into the small room we used as an office. I followed her in with 2 glasses of wine. "You guys are so organized," she said, trailing her hand along Logan's desk. It was an old roll-top desk he had restored. "Where do you keep the important stuff, like the deed, the insurance papers?" "In the bottom drawer," I said, pointing. It locks, but the key is just in the pencil cup. We are not exactly Fort Knox. Smart, she said, her eyes lingering on the drawer for a second too long. You can never be too careful. Identity theft is huge right now. It seemed like idle chatter. It seemed like she was just making conversation while waiting for a burger. I did not see the scanner in her eyes. I did not see her cataloging the location of our life's paperwork. The summer faded into autumn, and the house began to feel finished. We had a routine. We had a home. And then, the headache started. It began innocuously. Logan came home from a 24-hour shift rubbing his temples. He refused dinner, saying the light in the kitchen was too bright. I gave him 2 ibuprofen and a glass of water. Assuming it was dehydration or just the cumulative stress of the job, he slept for 12 hours straight. A week later, the dizziness arrived. I was in the garden, pulling the last of the dead tomato plants. When I heard a crash in the garage, I ran inside. Logan was leaning against the workbench, gripping the edge so hard his knuckles were white. A box of nails lay spilled on the concrete floor. I am fine, he said quickly, straightening up, but he swayed. Just stood up too fast. Low blood sugar. Probably. He smiled at me. It was the first time I saw that smile. The smile where the mouth turns up, but the eyes remain wide and alert. It is the smile a pilot gives passengers when the turbulence gets rough. It is the smile that says, I am terrified, but I will not let you see it. Logan, I said, stepping over the nails to touch his forehead. He was clammy. You do not have low blood sugar. You ate a massive lunch. I am tired. Quinn, seriously, do not nurse me right now. He brushed it off. He went to work the next day. He was a first responder. Ignoring pain was part of the job description. You carry the stretcher, you climb the ladder, you hold the line, and you do not complain about a headache. But the body does not care about heroism. The body keeps the score. The call came 3 weeks later. On a Tuesday morning, I was at the hospital, charting vitals for a post-op patient. When my cell phone buzzed, it was Captain Miller from the station. Quinn, his voice was tight. You need to come to the ER. We are bringing him in. What happened? I asked, my training kicking in, pushing the panic down into my stomach. Was it a fire? A collapse? No, Miller said. He was doing morning checks on the truck. He just went down. He could not track my finger with his eyes. Quinn, he was slurring. I met the ambulance in the bay. I was not a wife in that moment. I was a clinician. I watched them unload him. He was conscious, but he looked pale, gray, and confused. When he saw me, he tried to raise his hand, but his coordination was off. He missed my hand and hit the rail of the gurney. I am sorry, he mumbled. I am sorry, Quinn. Shh, I said, running alongside the stretcher. Do not talk. Just breathe. I knew the ER doctor. He was a friend. He ordered a CT scan immediately, followed by an MRI with contrast. I sat in the waiting room while the machine hummed and clicked behind the heavy doors. I did not call my parents. I did not call Brianna. I sat there with my hands clamped between my knees, bargaining with a God I had not spoken to in years. Let it be a migraine. Let it be a pinched nerve. Let it be vertigo. When the doctor called me back into the viewing room, the air in the room felt distinctively different. It was heavy, static. He did not have to speak. I looked at the monitor. I work in medicine. I know what a healthy brain looks like. It is symmetrical. It is clean. The image on the screen was not clean. There was a mass. It was large, blooming like a dark ink stain in the frontal lobe. With tendrils reaching deep into the sensitive structures of the midbrain, it was aggressive. I could tell just by the irregular borders that it was not benign. It was a monster that had been growing silently while we sanded floors and ate takeout and planned for a future that was rapidly evaporating. Glioblastoma, the doctor said softly. The word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Multiform. It is advanced. Quinn. The world tilted. The fluorescent lights seemed to buzz louder, drilling into my skull. "How long?" I asked. My voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. "With treatment, maybe a year. Without it, months." I looked at the screen again. That was my husband. That was the man who laughed when I spilled coffee on him. That was the man who promised me a loyal life. I walked out of the viewing room and went to the bay where they were holding him. He was sitting up, looking at his hands. When he saw me, he tried to smile again, that brave, terrible, protective smile. "Bad?" he asked. I walked over to him and took his face in my hands. I could not lie to him. We had promised no lies. "Yeah, baby," I whispered, my forehead resting against his. "It is bad." The house in Maple Hollow was waiting for us, with its half-painted trim and the garden we were going to plant in the spring. But as I held him there, amidst the beeping monitors and the smell of antiseptic, I knew we would never go back to that house the same way. The couple who had sanded those floors was gone. Our life had just been cleaved in two. There was the before, and now, terrifyingly, there was the after. The diagnosis did not just break our hearts, it reorganized the molecular structure of our universe. 1 minute, we were a young couple worrying about mortgage rates and paint colors, and the next, we were inhabitants of a new, terrifying country called terminal illness. The borders of this country were defined by sterile white curtains, and the currency was time, which was suddenly devaluing by the second. I stood in the hallway outside Logan's hospital room, my back pressed against the cold drywall. The air conditioning vent above me hummed with a mechanical indifference that made me want to scream. I held my phone in my hand. My fingers were numb. I had to make the calls. I had to tell the people who were supposed to care that the man they had eaten dinner with, the man whose hand they had shaken, was dying. I called my parents first. I dialed my mother's number, staring at the scuff mark on the linoleum floor while it rang. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3 rings. "Hello." Her voice was breathless, upbeat. "Quinn, we are just walking into the club. Your father is being honored by the Rotary tonight. Is everything all right?" "No," I said. The word came out like a croak. I cleared my throat and tried again, forcing the professional nurse voice to take over the trembling wife voice. "No, Mom, it is Logan. He collapsed at the station. We are at the hospital." There was a pause on the line, but not the kind of pause that precedes a scream or a sob. It was the pause of someone checking their watch. "Oh dear," she said. "Is it serious heat exhaustion? I told you that job was too physically demanding." "It is a brain tumor," I said. I did not sugarcoat it. I did not have the energy to soften the blow. "Glioblastoma, it is aggressive. They are saying months. Mom, not years." The silence stretched longer this time. I waited for her to say, "We are coming." I waited for her to say, "Turn the car around. Harold." I waited for the primal instinct of a mother to kick in, the one that compels you to run toward your child when they are in pain. "Oh, Quinn," she sighed. "That is terrible news. Just awful. We will keep him in our prayers. Of course." "Can you come?" I asked. I hated myself for asking. I hated the small, desperate child inside me that still needed them. "Tonight?" She sounded surprised, as if I had asked her to fly to the moon. "Honey, the ceremony is starting in 20 minutes. Your father has to give a speech. We cannot just leave. It would be incredibly rude to the committee. But keep us posted. Okay, send me a text when you know more about the treatment plan." She hung up. I stared at the phone. The screen went black. I felt a hollow ache in my chest, a void where my family should have been. They were not running late. They were not confused. They simply had better things to do than watch my life fall apart. I called Brianna next. "Oh my God," she screamed into the phone when I told her. "Oh my God. Quinn, I am leaving work right now. I am coming. Do not move. I will be there in 20 minutes. She arrived in 18. I was sitting in the plastic chair next to Logan's bed when she burst in. Logan was asleep, sedated after a seizure that had happened right after the MRI. He looked pale, his skin possessing a translucent quality that terrified me. Brianna rushed over and wrapped her arms around me. She smelled of expensive perfume and city grit. She cried loudly, her sobbing shaking my shoulders. I let her hold me. I was so starved for physical comfort that I leaned into her, letting my own tears soak into her blazer. "I cannot believe this," she whispered, pulling back to look at me. Her mascara was smeared, but her eyes were sharp. She looked at Logan, then back at me. "He is so young. This is unfair. This is so unfair." "I know," I said, wiping my face with the back of my hand. "We have to meet with the oncologist in an hour to talk about radiation." Brianna nodded, smoothing my hair back. Then, she leaned in closer, dropping her voice to a whisper. "Quinn," she said, "I know this is the last thing you want to think about right now, but you have to be practical. I work in corporate. I see how these things go. Does he have life insurance?" I blinked, the question feeling like a slap. "What?" "Life insurance," she repeated. "Through the department. Or a private policy. You need to check the paperwork immediately. Medical bills are going to destroy you if you are not careful. If the policy has a payout clause for terminal illness, you might be able to access it now." It was a logical question. It was a practical question. But standing over my husband's unconscious body, less than 4 hours after finding out he was dying, it felt like she was asking for the measurements of his coffin. "I do not know, Brianna," I snapped. "I really do not care right now." "I am just looking out for you," she said, raising her hands in surrender. "Someone has to be the adult in the room while you are grieving." Over the next 2 weeks, our life in Maple Hollow was dismantled and reassembled into something unrecognizable. I took an indefinite leave of absence from Cedar Ridge Medical Center. My supervisor was kind. She told me my job would be waiting, but we both knew I would not be back for a long time. I could not care for strangers when my own person was fading. We brought Logan home on a Thursday. The living room, where we had once eaten takeout on the floor and laughed about paint colors, became a medical command center. We moved the coffee table to the garage to make room for a rented hospital bed. The cozy throw blankets were replaced by chuck pads and sterile sheets. The side table where Logan used to keep his firefighting magazines was now covered in amber pill bottles steroids to reduce the swelling in his brain. Anti-seizure medication that made his hands shake, painkillers that made his eyes glassy. The soundscape of our home changed. The music we used to play classic rock. Old blues was replaced by the rhythmic whoosh-click of an oxygen concentrator and the beep of infusion pumps. Logan took it all with a grace that made me want to break things. He was the one losing his motor functions. He was the one who had to ask for help to walk to the bathroom. He was the one whose brilliant, sharp mind was being clouded by a fog he could not fight. Yet, he was the one comforting me. One afternoon, I was struggling to set up his IV pole. My hands shaking so badly I dropped the saline bag. It hit the floor with a heavy thud. I crumbled. I sat on the floor and buried my face in my hands, sobbing. "Quinn?" His voice came from the bed. It was weaker now, slurrier. "I cannot do this," I wept. "I am not strong enough. Logan, I am supposed to be a nurse, but I cannot be your nurse. It is too hard." He reached out his hand. I crawled over and took it. His grip was faint, a shadow of the strength he used to have. "You are doing it," he said. "You are my safest place. Remember, it is just mechanics. The rest is just us." He looked at me with those green-brown eyes, and I saw the fear behind them. He was terrified. He was 35 years old, and he was being measured for his end. He was being labeled terminal, palliative, stage 4. His life was being scheduled in doses of morphine and appointments he might not live to keep. But he was pushing all that fear down to make sure I was okay. That was the hero in him. It was maddening. I wanted him to scream. I wanted him to be angry. But he just loved me. And while he loved me, The world kept demanding its due. The financial spiral began slowly, then accelerated into a freefall. My salary was gone. Logan was on disability, which was a fraction of his regular pay. The insurance through the department was good, but it was not magic. There were deductibles. There were out-of-network consultation fees for specialists who promised hope but delivered only bills. Then there were the things insurance deemed not medically necessary. The ramp for the front porch so a wheelchair could get in, not covered. The specialized shower chair, not covered. The high-protein liquid nutrition he needed when he could not chew solid food, not covered. The mail carrier became my enemy. Every day. The mailbox was stuffed with white envelopes that had cellophane windows. Past due. Final notice. Explanation of benefits denied. I sat at the kitchen table late one night, surrounded by a fortress of paper. The calculator on my phone showed a number in red that made my stomach turn. We were bleeding money. Our savings, the house fund we had built so carefully, was gone. We were dipping into credit cards now. Brianna came over the next day. She let herself in, carrying a latte for herself and a plain black coffee for me. She sat down opposite me at the table, pushing aside a stack of rejection letters from the insurance company. "You look terrible," she said frankly. "Thank you," I said, rubbing my temples. "I have not slept in 3 days, and I think we are going to lose the house if this keeps up for another 2 months. "Is it that bad?" she asked, sipping her latte. "It is worse," I admitted. "I have to order a new commode chair tomorrow. It is $400. I do not have $400. Brianna, I have $40. She set her cup down. She reached into her purse a designer bag that cost more than my first car and pulled out a checkbook. "I can help," she said. I looked up, startled. "No, Brianna, I cannot take your money." "It is a loan," she said, uncapping a gold pen. "Just a bridge, until the disability back pay kicks in, or until things are settled." She wrote quickly, her signature a flamboyant loop of ink. She tore the check out and slid it across the table to me. $3,000. It was not a fortune. It would not pay off the mortgage. But in that moment, staring at the number, it looked like oxygen. It was 2 months of groceries. It was the commode chair. It was a buffer against the wolves at the door. Exhaustion does strange things to your pride. It erodes it. It makes you grateful for crumbs. It makes you blind to the hand that feeds you, even if that hand feels cold. "Brianna," I whispered, tears pricking my eyes. "I do not know when I can pay this back." "Don't worry about it," she said, patting my hand. Her nails were perfectly manicured, a sharp contrast to my chewed cuticles. "We are family, right? Family helps family. Just take it, use it for what you need." I took the check. I held it like a lifeline. "Thank you," I said. "Thank you so much." She smiled. It was a benevolent smile, the kind a queen gives a peasant. "Of course. Now, why don't you go check on Logan? I will stay here and tidy up this pile of mail for you. It looks overwhelming." "You would do that?" I asked. "Go," she urged. "I will sort it all out. Bins for bills, bins for junk. Go be with your husband." I stood up, feeling a wave of gratitude so profound it made me dizzy. I walked down the hall to the living room where Logan was sleeping. I sat by his bed, holding his hand, listening to the rhythm of his breathing. I did not know then that while I was holding his hand, Brianna was in my kitchen, not just sorting mail, but studying it. I did not know that she was looking at account numbers, balances, and policy limits. I did not know that the $3,000 was not a gift, or even a loan. It was an investment, and she expected a return. But that night, I just felt relief. I felt like I was not alone. I closed my eyes and let the hum of the oxygen machine lull me into a fitful sleep, dreaming of a world where $3,000 could actually save us. The unraveling of my support system did not happen with a loud snap. It happened with the quiet, agonizing friction of a rope fraying one thread at a time. In the beginning, immediately following the diagnosis, Brianna had been a fixture in our home. She was the sentinel at the door, the maker of coffee, the organizer of chaos. But as the acute terror of the first month settled into the chronic, grinding misery of long-term hospice care, her presence began to curdle. It started with the frequency of her visits. She went from stopping by every evening to every other day. And then the gaps stretched into spans of 4 or 5 days. The excuses were always delivered via text message, bright and breezy, as if she were canceling a yoga class rather than abandoning her dying best friend. Work is absolutely killing me this week, so sorry. Date night with Mark. Need a recharge. You understand. Right, I think I might be coming down with a cold. I do not want to get Logan sick. I watched her fade from our lives like a subscription service she had decided was no longer worth the monthly fee. Caregiving, I learned, is not a glamorous tragedy. It is bodily fluids, foul odors, sleepless nights, and the slow erasure of the person you love. It is ugly work. And Brianna, who curated her life for social media with surgical precision, did not do ugly, yet she never disappeared completely. She hovered. She kept a toe in the water just enough to maintain the title of best friend, but her visits changed flavor. She stopped asking, "How are you holding up?" and started asking, "Have you sorted out the paperwork yet?" The first crack in my reality appeared on a Tuesday night. I was sitting at the kitchen table, the only place in the house where the hum of Logan's oxygen machine was faint enough to ignore. I was paying bills online, trying to juggle the meager funds we had left. My eyes were burning from lack of sleep. I logged into our joint checking account, bracing myself for the red numbers. I saw the deposit from Brianna, the $3,000 she had loaned me the week before. It sat there in the ledger, a temporary dam against the flood. But then my eyes drifted to the line directly above it, dated the very next day. There was an electronic transfer, outgoing. The amount was exactly $3,000. I frowned, leaning closer to the screen. The transaction description was vague, just a string of numbers and a generic peer-to-peer transfer code. I rubbed my eyes, thinking I was hallucinating. I clicked on the details. It was gone. The money had entered our account on Monday and vanished on Tuesday. I tried to recall making a transfer. Had I paid the mortgage? No. That was automatic and labeled clearly. Had I paid the credit card? No. My memory was a Swiss cheese of exhaustion and grief. Holes everywhere. But surely I would remember moving that much money. A cold prickle of unease started at the base of my neck. I told myself it must be a glitch. Or maybe I had paid a large medical bill in a fog of sleep deprivation. I made a mental note to call the bank in the morning. But by morning, Logan had spiked a fever, and the mystery of the missing money was swallowed by the urgent need to keep him alive. The unease returned 2 days later with the mail. I had brought the stack of envelopes inside. Sifting through them on the counter, I distinctly saw a thick white envelope with the Department of Veterans Affairs logo and the Benefits Administration return address. It was heavy. It looked important. I set it down on the corner of the desk in the office, the safe spot, where I kept priority documents. I went to change Logan's sheets. When I came back 20 minutes later to open it, the desk was bare. I moved the laptop. I lifted the piles of magazines. I checked the floor. "Brianna?" I called out. She had let herself in 10 minutes ago and was currently in the kitchen making tea. She poked her head around the corner, holding a steaming mug. "Yeah, babe. Did you see a letter here?" I asked, frustration rising in my voice. "From the V.A. I just put it down." She took a sip of her tea, looking at the empty desk. "No, I haven't touched anything in here. Are you sure you brought it in? Maybe you left it in the car?" I held it in my hand. "Brianna," I said, my voice rising. "It was right here." She walked over and put a hand on my shoulder. Her touch felt patronizing. "Quinn, you are running on fumes. Yesterday you put the milk in the pantry. You are probably just misremembering. Check the trash. You might have tossed it with the junk mail by accident." I checked the trash. I dug through coffee grounds and empty gauze wrappers. It was not there, but her voice was so calm, so assured, that I started to believe her. Maybe I was losing my mind. Maybe the stress was finally breaking my brain, just like the tumor was breaking Logan's. Then came the calls from my parents. My mother called on a Thursday afternoon. She did not ask about Logan's fever. She did not ask about the new medication. "Quinn," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "I have been thinking, with all the strangers coming in and out of your house, nurses, aides, therapists, you really should be careful with your valuables." "What are you talking about?" "Mom," I asked, wiping down the counter. "The silver," she said. "Your grandmother's tea set, Logan's watch collection. You are distracted. Honey, it would be so easy for someone to slip something into a pocket. You should pack those things up. Maybe bring them over here for safekeeping. You will be so overwhelmed later. You won't want to deal with an inventory." Later. She did not say, "when he dies." She said later, but the implication hung in the air like smoke. She was not worried about theft. She was worried about inheritance. She wanted to secure the assets before the estate was frozen. "I am not packing up my house." "Mom," I said coldly. "I am trying to keep my husband comfortable. I am just trying to be practical," she huffed. "You never listen to good advice." My father was less subtle. He called asking for the contact information of our mortgage lender. "I just want to run some numbers," he said. "The market is shifting. Quinn, if you need to liquidate quickly after the timeline concludes, we need to know what the equity looks like. Is Logan's name on the deed alone? Or is it joint rights of survivorship?" "Why are you asking me this now?" I whispered, standing in the hallway while Logan slept 10 feet away. "Because someone has to think about the future," he said. "You are not going to be able to afford that place on a single income. Quinn, we are just looking out for you." They were stripping the carcass before the heart had even stopped beating, the breaking point the moment the unease solidified into a hard, cold rock in my stomach happened the following weekend. The guys from Logan Station, Engine 4, came by for a wellness check. It was really an excuse to bring food and love. They filled the living room with their bulk and their loud, boisterous energy. It was the first time in weeks I had seen Logan smile a real smile. Before they left, Captain Miller pulled me aside. He was a large man with a mustache that looked like a push broom, and he had tears in his eyes. "We passed the boot around the station," he mumbled, pressing a thick manila envelope into my hands. "And the union threw in some decent cash. It is not much, but it is for whatever you need. Groceries, bills, beer. Just take it." "Miller, I can't," I started. "Take it," he ordered. "We take care of our own." I hugged him. After they left, I opened the envelope in the kitchen. It was full of $20 and $50 bills. I counted it quickly. $850. It was a lifeline. I set the envelope on the kitchen counter, under the fruit bowl, intending to deposit it the next morning. Brianna was there. She had arrived halfway through the visit, playing the hostess, flirting harmlessly with the firefighters, making sure everyone had coasters. "They are such sweet guys," she said, wiping down the counters after they left. "Go sit with Logan. I will finish cleaning up the kitchen." I went to sit with Logan. I held his hand until he drifted off to sleep. An hour later, I went back to the kitchen to get the money. The envelope was gone. I lifted the fruit bowl. I checked the drawers. I got down on my hands and knees and looked under the cabinets. "Brianna," I yelled. She came in from the porch, looking annoyed. "What, is he okay?" "The money," I said, my breath coming in short gasps. "The envelope Miller gave me. It was right here under the fruit bowl." Brianna looked at the counter, then at me. Her face was a mask of perfect, smooth concern. "Quinn," she said softly. I tidied up the whole counter. There was no envelope. "Yes, there was," I insisted. "I counted it, $850. You told me to go sit with him while you cleaned." She walked over to me and took my hands. Her palms were cool. "Honey, listen to me. You are exhausted. I watched you put that envelope in your purse when Miller gave it to you. Remember?" I blinked. "No, I put it under the bowl." "You didn't," she said firmly. You are confusing things again. It is called caregiver fatigue. It is a real medical condition. You are hallucinating details because your brain is trying to cope with the trauma. Trust me, I cleaned this counter. There was no money. I stared at her. For a second, I felt the ground shift. Was she right? Was I losing it? I grabbed my purse and dumped it out on the table. Lipstick, receipts, keys, no envelope. See? Brianna said, her voice dripping with pity. You probably dropped it somewhere, or maybe you hid it and forgot. Why don't you go lie down? I will look for it. I looked at her smile. It was the smile of a nurse in a psych ward, placating a patient who claims to see spiders on the wall. It was a smile designed to make me feel small, broken, and incompetent. I pulled my hands away from her. Yeah, I whispered. Maybe you are right. I turned and walked out of the kitchen. But I did not go to the bedroom. I went to the back door, intending to get fresh air. I stopped when I saw Brianna through the screen door. She had stepped out onto the porch, phone pressed to her ear. She thought I had gone to lay down. I stood in the shadows of the mudroom, holding my breath. She is a mess, Brianna said into the phone. Her voice was different now, sharp, businesslike, stripped of the fake empathy. She is completely spinning. She thinks she lost the donation money. Yeah, I handled it. She paused, listening to the person on the other end. I know, she said, but we have to move fast on the liquidity. If she holds on to the house too long, the equity dries up with the medical liens. She is not thinking clearly. We need a plan for after. As soon as the payout hits, we need to be the ones directing the funds, or she is going to waste it on debts. I felt the blood drain from my face. We need a plan for after. She was not talking to a boyfriend. She was talking to my parents. The tone was familiar. Familial. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. The missing transfer, the missing mail, the missing cash, the gaslighting. They were not afraid of Logan dying. They were banking on it. They were not here to hold my hand. They were here to audit the estate. They were treating my husband's death like a business merger. And I was the incompetent CEO they were planning to oust. I backed away from the door, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I retreated into the hallway, away from the kitchen, away from the porch. I looked at the closed door of the room where my husband lay dying. They thought I was weak. They thought I was confused. They thought I was broken. I took a deep breath, inhaling the smell of antiseptic and old grief. They were about to find out that even a broken thing can have sharp edges. The shift from suspicion to investigation is a quiet, lonely transition. It does not happen with a dramatic musical score or a sudden revelation of light. It happens in the dark, usually at 3 a.m, when the rest of the world is asleep and you are left staring at the ceiling, realizing that the people you love are not just disappointing you, they are hunting you. I bought a notebook. It was a simple, black moleskin that I hid inside the lining of my winter coat in the hall closet. I did not trust my phone. I did not trust my laptop. If Brianna was watching my screen, or if my mother had guessed my passwords, which were painfully easy, usually variations of Logan's birthday, then digital records were compromised. I started writing things down. Tuesday, October 10th, Mom called, asked if Logan had signed the power of attorney updates. Did not ask about his seizure. Thursday, October 12th. Brianna offered to pick up groceries. Receipt shows $140. Groceries delivered were worth maybe $60. No change returned. Saturday, October 14th. Dad asked for the contact number of our insurance agent. Said he wanted to verify coverage limits for me. I called the agent later. Dad had tried to authorize himself as a representative on the policy. I became a forensic accountant of my own life. I stopped sleeping when Logan slept. Instead, I lay awake, listening to the house settle, wondering which floorboard would creak next. The paranoia was a physical weight. It felt like a tight metal band around my chest, making it hard to take a full breath. I told myself I was crazy. I told myself that grief was distorting my reality, turning innocent mistakes into malice. Brianna was my best friend. My parents were my parents. People do not just turn into villains because money is involved. Then came the credit alert. I had set up a basic identity monitoring service years ago and forgotten about it. I got an email on a Wednesday morning while I was crushing Logan's pills into applesauce. New inquiry detected. I opened the app, my thumb hovering over the screen. There was a hard inquiry on my credit report from a consolidation loan company. It had been initiated 2 days ago. I had not applied for a loan. I had not authorized anyone to check my credit. I called the company immediately, stepping out onto the back deck so Logan would not hear the tremor in my voice. "I am sorry, ma'am," the representative said, her voice tinny through the speaker. "The application was submitted online. They had your social security number, your current address, and your mother's maiden name for security verification." My mother's maiden name. I hung up. The cold air bit at my cheeks. But I did not feel it. I felt only the heat of betrayal. This was not a hacker in a basement in a foreign country. This was someone who knew that my mother's maiden name was erratic and difficult to spell. This was someone who had access to my personal files. I went back inside and walked straight to the office. Logan was a creature of habit. Even as his mind began to fray, his muscle memory for order remained. He stacked papers with the edges perfectly aligned. He kept his pens on the right side of the blotter. He closed drawers until they clicked. I stood in the doorway of the office. Brianna had been in here yesterday. She had offered to dust while I helped Logan bathe. The third drawer of the desk, the one that held our banking information and tax returns, was not flush with the frame. It was open by a fraction of an inch. I pulled it open. The file folders were there. But the order was wrong. The tab for 2023 taxes was in front of 2022, and the papers inside the banking folder were ruffled, sticking up at odd angles, as if someone had thumbed through them quickly and shoved them back in a panic. Someone had been searching. Someone had been cataloging. I needed proof. Suspicion is a ghost. Proof is a weapon. I drove to an electronics store 3 towns over, terrified that if I went to the local one, someone would see me. I bought a small, motion-activated security camera. It looked like a USB charger block. It was innocuous, boring, and invisible unless you knew exactly what to look for. I plugged it into the outlet behind the potted fern in the office. It had a direct view of the desk. I felt dirty doing it. I felt like I was violating the sanctity of my own home. I was spying on my best friend. I was setting a trap for the people who were supposed to be carrying me through this nightmare. But the alternative that I was losing my mind was worse. 2 days later, Brianna came over. She was wearing a soft beige sweater and carrying a bag of bagels. She looked so normal. She looked like the girl I had shared a dorm room with, the girl who had held my hair back when I was sick, the girl who had toasted at my wedding. "You look exhausted." "Quinn," she said, her voice thick with that practiced, sticky sympathy. "Why don't you go take a long shower, wash your hair? I will watch the desk. I will answer the phone if anyone calls." "The desk?" I asked, testing the water. "I mean, the office," she corrected quickly, laughing a little. "I need to charge my phone anyway. I will just hang out in there and catch up on emails while you relax." "Okay," I said. "Thank you. Bree, you are a lifesaver." I walked down the hall to the bathroom. I turned on the shower, letting the water run loud and hot. Then I sat on the closed toilet lid, pulled out my phone, and opened the camera app. The feed was grainy, but clear enough. I saw the office in black and white. I saw Brianna walk in. She did not sit in the chair to check emails. She did not plug in her phone. She stood in the center of the room for a moment, tilting her head, listening to the sound of the shower running down the hall. Then she moved. She moved with a speed and efficiency that made my stomach turn. She went straight to the desk. She opened the top drawer, the one where I kept the petty cash for the caregivers and the emergency grocery money. I watched on the small screen as my best friend reached in. She counted the bills. There was $300 in their money I had withdrawn yesterday to pay the night nurse. She took half of it. She did not take all of it. That was the genius of the theft. If she took all of it, I would know. If she took half, I would doubt myself. I would think I had spent it. I would think I had lost it. She folded the bills, $150, and tucked them into the inside pocket of her purse. Then she closed the drawer. She even used her sleeve to wipe the handle, erasing her prints. I stared at the phone, my hand shaking so hard the image blurred. It was not about the money. $150 was nothing in the grand scheme of the thousands we were drowning in. It was the intimacy of the violation. She was stealing from a dying man. She was stealing from a woman who was washing the smell of sickness off her skin in the next room. I turned off the shower. I sat there for another 5 minutes, breathing through the nausea. I had to go out there. I had to face her. When I walked into the kitchen, Brianna was sitting at the table, scrolling through Instagram. "Feel better?" she asked, smiling up at me. I gripped the back of a chair. "Brianna," I said. My voice was quiet. I wanted to give her an out. I wanted her to tell me she borrowed it. I wanted her to have a reason. "I noticed some cash missing from the desk drawer earlier. Do you know anything about that?" The reaction was instantaneous and terrifying. She did not flush. She did not stammer. Her face crumpled into a mask of absolute, wounded shock. "What?" she gasped. "Quinn, are you serious?" "I am just asking," I said. "I know I put $300 in there. Now there is half. And you think I took it?" Her voice rose, shrill and jagged. Tears welled up in her eyes instantly. "I come here every day. I help you. I clean your house. I loaned you money when you were desperate. And you are accusing me of stealing $100. "I am not accusing," I said, though I was. "I am just trying to understand." "You are not well," she said, shaking her head, the tears spilling over now. "Quinn, listen to yourself. You are paranoid. You are lashing out at the only person who is still standing by you. This is the stress talking. It is the grief. You are unstable." Unstable. There it was. The word, the label. "I am not unstable," I said, my voice hardening. "I know what I put in that drawer." "Do you?" she shot back. "Because last week you forgot where you put the mail. The week before that you forgot to pay the electric bill. You are falling apart. Quinn, and instead of letting me help you, you are attacking me." She grabbed her purse, the purse with my money in it, and stormed toward the door. "I am going to go," she said, playing the victim perfectly. "I cannot be around this energy right now. I hope you get some rest. Quinn, I really do. For Logan's sake." She slammed the door. I stood in the silence of the kitchen, the echo of her accusation ringing in my ears. If I did not have that video on my phone, I would have believed her. I would have called her to apologize. I would have begged her to come back. She was not just stealing money. She was stealing my sanity. She was gaslighting me so effectively that if I tried to tell anyone she stole from me, they would look at the grieving, exhausted widow and shake their heads in pity. The second blow came 2 days later, and it revealed the architecture of the entire plan. My father called on a Friday evening. "Quinn," he said, his voice grave and serious, "your mother and I have been talking. We are very worried about you." "I am fine." "Dad," I said, lying. "You are not fine," he said. "We spoke to Brianna. She was in tears. Quinn, she says you are confused. She says you are accusing people of things that didn't happen. She says you are forgetting financial obligations." My grip on the phone tightened. Brianna had reported back to headquarters. "She is lying," I said. "She is your best friend," he countered. "Why would she lie?" "Look, Quinn, nobody blames you. This is a tragedy. You are under immense pressure, but we cannot let Logan's estate and your future be jeopardized because you are not in a state of mind to handle the details." "What are you saying?" "We have spoken to the family attorney," he said. The words were smooth, rehearsed. "We think it would be best if we put some temporary safeguards in place. Just a document, a temporary financial oversight agreement. It would just give me and your mother the authority to manage the accounts, pay the bills, and handle the insurance claims until you are yourself again, so you do not make mistakes." The puzzle pieces snapped together with a deafening click. It was not just petty theft. It was a coup. Brianna's job was to destabilize me. Her job was to create a record of my incompetence, the lost mail, the missing money, the outbursts, the confusion. She was the witness building the case that Quinn Reyes was mentally unfit to manage her affairs. My parents were the closers. They would swoop in with the legal solution. They would sign a temporary oversight agreement that would give them control of the house, the bank accounts, and the life insurance payout. They would sell the house for my own good. They would invest the money for my future. And I would be left with nothing but a pat on the head and an allowance. They were using my husband's death to render me a child again. They were using my grief as a weapon to strip me of my autonomy. I looked at the phone. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him I knew everything. I wanted to tell him about the camera and the credit inquiry and the fact that I was not the one who was broken. But I stopped. If I screamed, I was the unstable widow. If I fought, I was the irrational daughter. If I argued, I played right into the script they had written for me. "I hear you, Dad," I said. My voice was flat, calm, cold. "Good," he said, sounding relieved. "I knew you would be reasonable. I will have the lawyer draft the papers. We can bring them over next week." "Send them over," I said. "I will look at them." "That is my girl," he said. I hung up the phone. I walked back into the office. I looked at the little camera hidden behind the fern. I looked at the misaligned papers on the desk. I was not going to sign anything, but I was done arguing. You do not win against people like this by begging them to be decent. You do not win by shouting the truth. You win by being smarter. You win by being quieter. They thought they were closing in on a helpless animal. They did not realize that the animal had stopped running and started waiting. I sat down at the desk and pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. I had a camera. I had dates. I had a credit report. Now, I needed a lawyer of my own. And I needed to make sure that when the trap snapped shut, I wasn't the one inside it. The transition to hospice care did not happen with a siren or a rush of activity. It happened when the fight simply left the room. We stopped going to the hospital. We stopped scheduling MRI scans. We stopped talking about treatment protocols and experimental trials. The house, which had been a frantic command center of medical machinery and schedules, suddenly exhaled. The noise dropped away. The world outside, the world of traffic and deadlines and weather reports felt like it was happening on a different planet. Our world shrank to the size of the master bedroom. We moved the hospital bed in there so Logan could look out the window at the maple tree in the backyard. The light in the room became amber and soft, filtered through the blinds. We spoke in whispers, not because we had to, but because anything louder felt like a violation of the peace we were trying to curate. It felt like the whole house was walking on tiptoe, holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable. Elena Ward, our hospice nurse, was a woman made of sturdy grace. She moved with an efficiency that was never hurried. She smelled of lavender soap and antiseptic. On a Tuesday afternoon, 3 days after I had installed the camera in the office, Elena caught my arm as I was walking out of the kitchen with a glass of ice chips. She did not use medical jargon. She did not talk about Cheney-Stokes respiration or modeling, though I saw the signs myself. She just looked at me with clear, kind eyes. "Quinn," she said softly, "if there is anyone who needs to say goodbye, anyone who needs to have a conversation with him while he can still hear it, they should come now. Today." The finality of the word today hit me in the chest like a physical blow. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. I went into the hallway to make the calls. I stood by the window, watching a squirrel run along the fence line, a burst of life that seemed mocking in its energy. I called my mother first. "Hi, honey," she answered. I could hear the clinking of silverware in the background. "We are just sitting down to lunch with the Millers. Is everything okay?" "It is time. Mom," I said. "The nurse says it is a matter of hours, maybe a day. You need to come now." There was a pause. I waited for the gasp. I waited for the sound of a chair scraping back. "Oh," she said. Her voice shifted, not into panic, but into a strange, detached efficiency. Today, oh, Quinn, that is well. We are an hour away, and your father has that meeting with the estate planner at 3 o'clock. We can't really reschedule that. Considering the circumstances, it is important for your future. Mom, I said, gripping the phone. Logan is dying, right now. I know, she soothed, as if I were a toddler throwing a tantrum. We will get there as soon as we can. Probably this evening. Have you called the funeral home yet? You really need to lock in the transport service. Quinn, if he passes in the middle of the night, you do not want to be scrambling. She was talking about logistics while I was talking about the end of my world. I hung up and called Brianna. Hey, she chirped. I am just walking into a client presentation. Make it quick. Elena says it is the end. Bree, I said, if you want to see him... Oh, God, she said. Today, seriously. I mean, obviously I want to be there, but I have this pitch. And then I have to brief the VP. I can probably swing by after work around 7. 7 might be too late, I said. Well, I will try, she said, her voice taking on that defensive edge I had come to recognize. I can't just walk out. Quinn, I have a job. Some of us still have to work. Just tell him I love him. I will be there when I can. She hung up. I stood in the hallway, looking at the silent phone. I was not angry. I was past anger. I was in a place of cold, crystalline clarity. They were not coming, not really. They would show up when it was convenient, or when there was something to sign, but they would not show up for the hard part. They would not show up to hold the bucket or wet the sponge. I walked back into the bedroom. Logan was awake. It was one of those rare, miraculous windows of lucidity that sometimes happen at the very end. The surge, the final rally. His eyes were open, and the foggy, drugged glaze was gone. He looked like himself again, tired, gaunt, pale. But him, the man who had laughed when I spilled coffee on his jacket, he watched me come in. He saw the look on my face. He saw the phone in my hand. They aren't coming, he whispered. It wasn't a question. I went to the side of the bed and sat down, taking his hand. It was cool to the touch. They are busy, I lied, though we both knew the truth. Traffic, work. Logan squeezed my hand. His grip was weak, but his eyes were fierce. Quinn, he rasped. The closet, the lockbox. Bring it here. I hesitated. Logan, you need to rest. Please, he said. Now, while I can still talk. I got up and went to the closet. I reached up to the top shelf and pulled down the heavy metal fireproof box. I brought it to the bed and set it on the mattress beside him. Open it, he said. Code is our date, November 1st. I spun the dials. 1101. The latch clicked open. Inside, the papers were organized with a precision that made my heart ache. There were labeled folders, deed, title, accounts. I did not just sit here. Quinn, Logan said. His voice was thin, reedy, like wind through dry grass. I saw it, before you did. I looked at him, startled. Saw what? The hunger, he said. Your dad asking about the mortgage rates. Brianna looking at the bank statements on the desk when she thought I was asleep. I saw them. Tears pricked my eyes. I thought I was crazy, I whispered. I thought I was imagining it. You are not crazy, he said. You are just good. You see the best in people. That is why I love you. But I see the fire hazards. I see the structural weakness. He pointed a shaking finger at a blue folder on top. I met with a legal advisor, he said, through the department union. He came here when you were at the pharmacy last month. I opened the folder. It was a dense legal document, stamped and notarized, irrevocable trust, beneficiary designation. The house is protected, Logan said, forcing the words out. It is in a trust. They can't force a sale. They can't touch the equity. And the life insurance, the payout, it routes directly to a separate account I opened in your name only. No joint access. no temporary oversight clauses. I stared at the papers, while I had been running around trying to keep his body alive. He had been using his last reserves of energy to build a fortress around my future. He had outmaneuvered them from his deathbed. "There is a letter," he said, nodding to a white envelope sealed with tape. "For you. Read it alone. Not now. Later." I touched the envelope. It felt heavy. "I did not tell you," he whispered, his breathing hitching, "because I needed you to focus on us. I didn't want you fighting a war on two fronts, but now you have the ammunition." He closed his eyes for a moment, gathering strength. When he opened them again, they were wet. "Promise me something," he said. "Anything," I said, leaning closer, pressing my forehead against his shoulder. "Do not let them rewrite the story," he said. His voice was fierce, vibrating in his chest. "They are going to try. They are going to say, 'I was sick and you were overwhelmed.' They are going to say you need help managing things. They are going to try to turn you into a victim." He gripped my hand, his fingers digging into my skin. "Do not let them. You are the strongest person I know. You carried me. You carried all of this. I will stop them," I vowed. "I promise. Logan." "And Quinn." "Yeah." He looked at me, and a faint, ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Rebuild. The roof, the porch, the life. Fix it up, but do not do it for them. Do it for you, and do not do it neatly. Life is not neat." He took a jagged breath. "If you can still laugh one day," he whispered. "Real belly laugh. Like you did at the diner, that is how I will know you survived. That is how I will know I did a good job." "I will," I choked out, the tears finally spilling over. "I will laugh, Logan. I promise." He closed his eyes then, the burst of energy fading as quickly as it had come. His breathing slowed, settling back into the heavy, rhythmic labor of the end. I sat there for a long time, the metal box cold against my leg, the papers scattered on the quilt. The room was quiet again, but the quality of the silence had changed. It was no longer the silence of fear. It was the silence of a plan. I looked at the blue folder. I looked at the sealed letter. My parents were at a meeting. Brianna was at a pitch. They were out there in the world, plotting their takeover, checking their watches, waiting for the payout. They had no idea that the man in this bed had already beaten them. I put the papers back in the box. I locked it. I slid it under the bed, directly beneath where I was sitting. Then I took my husband's hand, and I waited. I did not call them back to tell them to hurry. I did not beg them to come. I let them stay away. Because this moment, this final, sacred, heartbreaking moment belonged to the people who showed up. It belonged to us. And I was not going to share it with anyone who viewed his death as a payday. Logan died on a Tuesday, just as the sun was beginning to bleed a pale, watery gray through the blinds of our bedroom window. It was not the dramatic, gasping finale that movies teach you to expect. There were no final speeches, no sudden surges of strength where he sat up and gripped my shoulders. It was simply a cessation. The rhythm of the oxygen concentrator kept pulsing whoosh, click, whoosh, click, but the rhythm of the chest beneath my hand simply stopped. I waited for the next breath. I counted the seconds. 1, 2, 10, 20. It did not come. I sat there for a long time, holding his hand, feeling the room undergo a physical transformation. For months, this room had been a battlefield. It had been filled with the frantic energy of fighting, of dosing, of scheduling, of bargaining with biology. But in that moment, the war ended. The air grew still. The tension evaporated, leaving behind a silence so absolute it felt heavy, like water filling the space from the floorboards to the ceiling. I did not cry immediately. I just looked at him. The lines of pain that had etched themselves into his forehead over the last 6 months had smoothed out. He looked young again. He looked like the man who had sat on a tailgate overlooking the river and promised me a loyal life. "Okay," I whispered into the quiet. Okay. Logan, you can rest now. I stood up and turned off the oxygen machine. The silence that followed was deafening. The days between his death and the memorial were a blur of logistical gray. The Havenbrook Fire Department took over, wrapping me in a cocoon of efficiency and protocol. They handled the transport. They handled the press release. They handled the venue. Captain Miller sat at my kitchen table, his hat in his hands, asking me about honor guards and bagpipes, treating me with a reverence that made me feel fragile. I moved through it all like a sleepwalker. I signed papers. I chose a casket, a simple mahogany one that Logan would have approved of. I selected the songs, and with a stubbornness that defied all logic. I reserved 3 seats in the front row. I printed the signs myself on cardstock. Reserved for Mother, reserved for Father, reserved for Brianna. I knew what Logan had said. I knew about the lockbox under the bed. I knew they were circling like vultures, but a small, stupid part of me, the part that was still a daughter, still a best friend, wanted to be wrong. I wanted them to see the obituary, to see the reality of the loss, and to snap out of their greed. I wanted them to remember that they loved me, or at least that they were supposed to. I placed the signs on the chairs myself, smoothing the paper over the fabric. Then came the morning of the service. I woke up alone in the house that felt too big. I put on the black dress I had bought 3 years ago for a charity gala, never imagining I would wear it to bury my husband. I did my hair. I put on waterproof mascara at 9:45 in the morning, 15 minutes before the service was set to begin. I checked my phone. The text from Brianna came through first. Work emergency. Total nightmare here. I cannot leave. So sorry. Quinn, love you. I stared at the screen. 12 minutes before the bell. She had waited until the absolute last possible second to ensure I could not call her, could not argue, could not beg. It was a tactical withdrawal. Then, the voicemail icon appeared. My mother. I lifted the phone to my ear. Standing in the vestibule of the funeral home, watching the firefighters line up in their dress blues. Quinn, her voice said. It was the voice she used when she was returning a meal at a restaurant, polite, but firm. We are having car trouble. The engine just would not turn over. We are waiting on a tow truck, but it does not look like we will make it in time for the start. Go ahead without us. We will be there when we can. I lowered the phone. The lie was so lazy it was insulting. My father's car was brand new, and even if it had broken down, they could have called a cab. They could have called me. They could have walked. They were not coming. The hope I had been nurturing, that small, foolish flame, was snuffed out. It was replaced by the cold, hard stone of reality. Logan was right. They had shown me who they were. I walked into the chapel. I sat in the front row. I stared at the 3 empty chairs. The service began. The chaplain spoke. The bells rang. I stood at the podium and delivered my speech about presence, about love being a verb, about the emptiness of promises compared to the weight of showing up. I spoke to the room, but I was really speaking to the ghosts in the front row. When the service ended, and the crowd began to shuffle toward the exits or toward the reception line, I remained standing near the casket, clutching the folded flag the chief had given me. The triangle of blue fabric felt like a shield against my chest. That was when she approached me, the stranger, the woman I had noticed earlier, the one who looked out of place in her plain coat among the uniforms. She stopped in front of me, up close. The resemblance was undeniable. She had the same jawline as Logan, the same way of holding her mouth when she was thinking, and she had his eyes, those specific, green-brown eyes that had been my home for 5 years. I am Marin, she said. Her voice was raspy, as if she had not used it in a while. I am Logan's sister. I blinked, the shock momentarily piercing through my numbness. Logan had mentioned Marin only a handful of times. They had drifted apart years ago, not a fight, just the slow erosion of distance and different lives. He had told me she lived on the coast, that she was a wanderer, that she did not do family stuff. Marin, I breathed. He didn't think you would come. I saw the notice online, she said. She did not reach out to hug me. She kept her hands in her pockets, her posture rigid. I drove through the night. I wanted to see him. I guess I was too late for that. She looked at the casket, her expression unreadable, and then she looked at me. He talked about you, she said, repeating the line that would stick with me forever. When we did talk, he said you were the safest place on earth. Thank you, I said, my voice cracking. I am glad you are here, Marin. Really. She did not smile. Instead, she pulled one hand out of her pocket. She was holding a piece of paper, folded into a tight square. I debated giving this to you, she said. It feels cruel, but looking at those 3 empty chairs over there, she gestured with her chin toward the front row. I think you need to see it. I think Logan would want you to see it. What is it? I got a message last night, Marin said. Anonymous. Someone used a burner number to send me a screenshot. I don't know who sent it. Maybe a friend of yours who grew a conscience. Maybe an ex-boyfriend of that girl. I don't know, but the header of the chat is clear. She handed me the paper. I unfolded it. It was a color printout of a text message group chat. The name of the group was at the top. After Logan, my stomach dropped so fast I felt dizzy. The participants were listed: Mom, Brianna, Dad. I read the timestamps. They were from 2 days ago, the day Logan died. Brianna: he is fading fast. Nurse says maybe 24 hours. I am at the house now. I did a sweep of the office. The life insurance policy is definitely the big one. 500,000. Mom: good. We need to make sure Quinn does not do anything stupid with it. She is too emotional. She will try to donate it to some charity or pay off the house. We need that liquidity for the investment portfolio we talked about. Dad: I have the real estate agent lined up. We can list the house next week. Market is hot. If we move her into a condo, we can net 150 on the sale easily. Brianna, leave her to me. I will handle the narrative. She is already questioning her memory. I have her convinced she is losing it. And then, the final message, the one that Marin had pointed to. Mom: do not worry about her pushing back. She will be numb. We will handle the decisions. I stared at the paper. The words swam before my eyes. She will be numb. They were banking on my grief. They were counting on my devastation to paralyze me so they could pick the bones clean. They had a group chat named after Logan while he was still breathing. I looked up at Marin. The world felt sharp, high definition, and incredibly cold. Who sent this to you? I asked. I told you, I do not know, Marin said. But whoever it was, they hate them as much as I do right now. I refolded the paper. I did not crumble. I did not scream. I felt that ice calm settle over me again, but this time, it was armor. It was diamond hard. Thank you, I said. You have no idea what you just gave me. I think I do, Marin said. She looked at the empty chairs again. If you need anything, I am staying at the motel by the highway. I am not leaving until you tell me to. Stay, I said. Please. She nodded and stepped back into the crowd. I turned and walked out of the chapel. I stood in the reception line. I shook hands. I accepted hugs. I smiled wanly when people told me how strong I was. I played the part of the grieving widow perfectly, just as they predicted. I was numb. Yes, but it was the numbness of a surgeon before the first cut. As the crowd began to thin out, I walked toward the parking lot to load the flowers into the truck. A young firefighter, a rookie named Davis, who had been one of the ones to carry the casket, fell into step beside me. Mrs. Quinn Reyes, he said awkwardly, taking a heavy wreath from my hands. Let me get that. Thank you, Davis, I said. He hesitated, looking down at his shiny dress shoes. He looked troubled. I probably shouldn't say anything, he started, rubbing the back of his neck. But it has been bugging me all morning. I know your folks said they had car trouble. I stopped walking. Yes, That is what they said. Well, Davis said, grimacing, I was coming in from the north side of town this morning, around 9 o'clock. I passed that big Remax office on Oak Street, the one with the glass front. I looked at him. Yes. I saw your dad's car, Davis said. I know it because I helped him jump it last winter at the station BBQ. That silver sedan. It was parked right in front, and I saw your parents walking in. They didn't look like they were having car trouble, ma'am. They were carrying folders. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. They weren't stuck on the side of the road. They weren't waiting for a tow truck. They were signing listing agreements. They were skipping the funeral to sell my house. Thank you for telling me. Davis, I said. My voice was so calm it frightened me. I just thought you should know, he said. It didn't sit right with me. Not today. Not for Logan. No, I said. It doesn't sit right. I got into Logan's truck. I placed the folded flag on the passenger seat. I placed the folded screenshot from Marin on the dashboard. I started the engine. They thought I was numb. They thought I was a victim. They thought they were going to walk into my house tomorrow with casseroles and contracts and take everything my husband had built. I put the truck in gear. They were about to find out that the woman who had held Logan Hale's hand while he died was not the same woman they had pushed around for 30 years. I was not numb. I was awake, and I was ready for them. It had been exactly 7 days since the funeral. 7 days of silence from the people who claimed to be my blood, and 7 days of noise from the lawyers, the adjusters, and the endless administrative machinery of death. I had spent the week in a state of suspended animation, moving through the house like a ghost in my own life, waiting for the other shoe to drop. I knew they would come. Predators are predictable that way. They wait for the wounded animal to stop thrashing before they move in to feed. The doorbell rang at 6 p.m. on a Tuesday. I was expecting them. In fact, I had prepared the living room like a stage set. I had cleared the coffee table of magazines and coasters. I had angled the blinds so the streetlights would not cast a glare. I had checked the battery level on the small, inconspicuous camera hidden behind the fern in the office, and I had moved a second one, a new edition, onto the bookshelf in the living room. Nestled between a stack of Logan's hardcover thrillers, I walked to the door. I checked the peephole. There they were, a tableau of performed grief. My mother stood in the center, clutching a ceramic casserole dish covered in aluminum foil. My father stood behind her, wearing a somber tie and a grave expression. And Brianna was to the left, holding a bouquet of white lilies, the generic "sorry for your loss" flower you buy at a grocery store checkout. I opened the door. Quinn. My mother gasped, surging forward before I could even step back. She thrust the casserole dish at me. It was heavy, still warm, and pulled me into a hug that felt more like a capture than an embrace. Oh, honey, we have been so worried. Why haven't you answered the phone? We called 3 times yesterday, my father added. Stepping into the foyer without waiting for an invitation, he looked around the hallway, his eyes scanning the walls as if checking for structural damage. Silence is very alarming. Quinn, you can't just shut people out. I have been busy, I said. My voice was steady. Burying my husband. Well, of course, Brianna chimed in, stepping past me and heading straight for the living room as if she still owned the place. She set the flowers on the mantel, right next to the folded flag. The juxtaposition made my stomach turn. But you need your support system, babe. You can't do this alone. We brought lasagna. They settled themselves into the living room. My parents took the love seat. Brianna took the armchair, Logan's chair. I remained standing near the entrance to the kitchen, watching them arrange themselves. It took less than 5 minutes for the mask to slip. They started with the requisite platitudes. How are you sleeping? Are you eating? It is so quiet in here, but the conversation felt brittle, like thin ice over a rushing river of agenda. You know, my father said, clearing his throat and leaning forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Your mother and I were driving over here, looking at the neighborhood. It is really changing. Quinn, property values are at an all-time high right now, but the upkeep on a place like this, for a single woman, It is a nightmare. It is too much house for you, my mother agreed, nodding sympathetically. The memories alone must be haunting. We were thinking, for your own mental health, a fresh start is really the best option. There are some lovely luxury condos being built near us, gated, maintenance-free. And the liquidity is key, Brianna added. Crossing her legs, she looked at me with wide, earnest eyes. I have a friend in wealth management who specializes in sudden windfalls. Insurance payouts can be tricky if you do not invest them immediately. I could set up a meeting for us. Just to look at options for the life insurance money. You want that $500,000 to work for you, right? There it was, the number. She knew the exact amount. She had never asked me. She had snooped for it. I walked over to the coffee table. I set my phone down. Face up. I tapped the screen once. The voice memo app was already open. The red recording bar began to pulse. Sit down, Quinn, my father commanded gently. Let's make a plan. We can call the realtor tomorrow. I did not sit. I looked at them. I looked at the people who had raised me, and the woman who had sworn sisterhood to me. I saw them not as family, but as strangers who shared a history I no longer recognized. I have a question, I said softly. The room went quiet. Of course. Honey, my mother said. Anything. Why didn't you come to the funeral? The air in the room seemed to freeze. My mother blinked. She exchanged a quick, darting glance with my father. Brianna shifted in the chair, pulling her skirt down. Quinn, my mother sighed, her voice taking on a tone of wounded patience. We told you. The car died. It was a disaster. We were stranded on the side of the highway for hours waiting for AAA. By the time they towed us to the shop, the service was over. We were devastated. Devastated, my father echoed. I was ready to sue the manufacturer. And I told you, Brianna said, shaking her head. Work. My boss is a tyrant. If I had left, I would have been fired. You know I wanted to be there. Quinn, it killed me to miss it. I looked at my father. So, you were at the mechanic shop all morning? Yes, he said firmly. Until afternoon. And you? I looked at Brianna. You were at your office downtown. Trapped in a conference room, she confirmed. It was hell. I nodded slowly. I walked to the sideboard where I had left a manila folder. It was thin, containing only 3 sheets of paper and a USB drive. That is interesting, I said. Because Davis, one of the rookies from Logan Station, saw your car that morning. Dad, the silver sedan, it wasn't on the side of the highway. My father's face went rigid. He must have been mistaken. There are thousands of silver sedans. He saw it parked in front of the Re/Max office on Oak Street, I continued, my voice remaining level. At 9 o'clock in the morning, he saw you and Mom walking in with folders. You weren't stranded. You were signing a listing agreement to sell my house before my husband was even in the ground. My mother's mouth opened and closed like a fish. That is ridiculous. You are listening to gossip. And Brianna. I turned to her. She looked pale. I checked the visitor logs at your office building. I called the front desk. You didn't swipe in that day. In fact, you took a personal day. You weren't working. I was working from home, she stammered. I meant I was logged in. Stop, I said. It wasn't a shout. It was a command. I opened the folder. I took out the first sheet of paper. It was the bank transaction log, highlighted in yellow. This is a printout of my bank statement, I said, placing it on the coffee table in front of them. Here is the $3,000 loan you gave me, Brianna, and here, the very next day, is a transfer out of my account for exactly $3,000, a transfer I didn't make. You are confused, Brianna said quickly, her voice rising in pitch. Quinn, we talked about this. You are grieving. You are mixing things up. I never touched your account. Here's the confirmation from the Veterans Affairs Office, I said, placing the second paper down. For the benefit packet I supposedly lost. The tracking number shows it was delivered. And here's the timestamp from when I installed the camera in the office. The room went deadly silent. I picked up the remote control for the television mounted on the wall. I had already queued up the footage. I pressed play. The screen flickered to life. It showed the grainy black and white view of our home office. It showed Brianna walking in. It showed her listening for the shower. It showed her opening the drawer, counting the cash, and sliding it into her purse. I paused the video on the frame where her hand was deep in the drawer. I looked at her. Tell me again that I'm confused. Brianna. Tell me again that I am unstable. Brianna was trembling. She stood up, her face splotchy and red. You recorded me. That is illegal. You can't just record people in a private home. It is my home, I said, and you were stealing from it. My mother stood up now, her face twisting into a scowl I had seen 1,000 times in my childhood, the look that meant I was in trouble. Quinn, this is enough, she snapped. So what? So she took a little cash. She has done everything for you, and we went to the realtor because we knew you would not be able to handle the sale yourself. We were trying to help you. You are ungrateful, and you are acting like a lunatic. We are your parents, my father bellowed, his voice booming in the small room. We are trying to protect your future. You are going to blow that money on grief counseling or some shrine to him, and in 10 years you will be destitute. We have a right to intervene. You have no rights, I said, and you have no future here. I reached into the folder for the final document. It was a photocopy of the letter Logan had left in the lockbox, stapled to a formal legal affidavit. Logan knew, I said. He knew before I did. He knew you were circling. He knew you were waiting for the payout. I held up the document. This is a signed statement from Logan Hale, witnessed by the department's legal liaison and notarized 3 weeks before he died. It details his suspicions of financial coercion and elder abuse, though in this case. It is vulnerable adult abuse. It explicitly states that if any of you approach me regarding the sale of the house or the disbursement of insurance funds within 30 days of his death, this file is to be automatically forwarded to the State Investigator's Office for Fraud. I looked at my father. He had gone the color of ash. I called the liaison this morning, I said. I told him you were coming. I told him what you wanted. The file has already been sent. You little bitch, my father spat. The veneer of the concerned patriarch shattered completely. After everything we did, we raised you, we paid for your school. You are going to send the police after your own father. You aren't my father, I said. The words felt light, like helium balloons releasing from my chest. And you? I looked at my mother, whose eyes were wide with terror. Aren't my mother, and you? I looked at Brianna, who was crying silently, looking at the door. Aren't my sister? I walked to the front door and threw it open. The evening air rushed in, cool and clean. You are just people who share my last name, I said, and you are trespassing. You can't do this, my mother wailed. Quinn, be reasonable. We are family. Get out, I said. Quinn. Brianna started, taking a step toward me. Get out, I screamed. It was the first time I had raised my voice. It was a raw, guttural sound that came from the deepest part of my grief. It was the sound of a woman who was done being polite. They scrambled. The dignity was gone. My father grabbed his coat, muttering curses. My mother stumbled past me, clutching her purse but forgetting the casserole. Brianna ran, not making eye contact, her heels clicking frantically on the hardwood. They spilled out onto the porch and down the steps, retreating to their cars like roaches scattering when the light turns on. If you step onto this property again, I called out after them, my voice ringing in the quiet street, I will call the police. Any communication goes through my attorney. Do not call me. Do not text me. We are done. I watched them drive away. My father peeled out, tires screeching. Brianna sat in her car for a moment, head in her hands. Before pulling away, I stood there until their taillights disappeared around the curve. Then, I stepped back inside. I closed the door. I turned the deadbolt. Click. I looked at the living room. The casserole was still sitting on the table, sweating condensation onto the wood. The lilies were starting to wilt in the warmth of the room. I picked up the casserole dish and walked to the kitchen. I opened the trash can and scraped the entire lasagna into the bin. I dropped the dish in after it. It shattered with a satisfying crash. I walked back to the mantel. I picked up the lilies. I threw them in the trash too. Then I picked up the folded flag. I brushed a speck of dust from the blue felt. "I did it, Logan," I whispered to the empty room. "I told you I would stop them." The house was silent, but for the first time in months, it did not feel empty. It felt clean. It felt like a space where I could finally breathe. I sat down in Logan's chair. I took a deep breath. My hands were shaking, but my heart was steady. The war was over. Now, I just had to figure out how to live in the peace. The aftermath of the confrontation did not feel like a victory lap. It felt like the settling of dust after a building has collapsed. There was no parade, no confetti, just the stark, quiet reality of cleaning up the debris. The fallout hit fast, and it hit hard. Logan's affidavit, combined with the evidence I had compiled in my black notebook and the digital files from the cameras, created a legal tidal wave that Brianna could not swim against. The state investigator was not interested in her tears or her stories about my grief-induced confusion. He was interested in the paper trail. He was interested in the unauthorized credit inquiry that traced back to her IP address. He was interested in the bank logs. Brianna was formally investigated for financial fraud and identity misuse. The friend she had in wealth management turned out to be a contact she had been grooming to help funnel the insurance money into accounts I would have had limited access to. It was a sophisticated scheme, but it was brittle. Under the weight of facts, it shattered. She lost her job. She lost her reputation in the city. The last I heard, she had moved back to her hometown, living in her parents' basement. The very fate she had mocked me for fearing. My parents tried a different tactic. They tried to win the court of public opinion. For a few weeks, the rumors swirled around town. I would walk into the grocery store and feel the eyes on me. I heard the whispers in the produce aisle. "Poor Quinn. She is having a breakdown. She attacked her parents. She is unstable." They told anyone who would listen that I was mentally fragile, that grief had made me paranoid, and that they were the victims of a daughter who had lost her grip on reality. They tried to paint themselves as the martyrs who had been cast out while trying to save me. But small towns are interesting places. They love gossip, but they love the truth even more. I did not have to scream to clear my name. I just had to show the receipts. I shared the video of Brianna stealing from the desk with a few key people, Captain Miller at the station and the head nurse at Cedar Ridge. I let them hear the audio recording of my father talking about selling my house before the funeral. The narrative flipped overnight. The sympathy my parents craved turned into scrutiny. The invitations to dinner parties stopped coming. The Rotary Club suddenly had no open slots for my father to speak. They realized too late that in a battle between their word and my evidence, they were unarmed. They retreated into a cold, angry silence, moving to a retirement community 3 hours away without saying goodbye. I did not chase them. I changed the locks, and I let them go. Returning to work was the next mountain I had to climb. I went back to Cedar Ridge Medical Center 3 months after the funeral. Putting on my scrubs felt strange, like putting on a costume from a play I had performed in a past life. I started part-time in the administrative wing, handling scheduling and patient intake. I thought I wanted to stay away from the bedside. I thought I was too raw to handle the blood and the tears. I was wrong. 6 months in, I found myself wandering toward the palliative care wing. I found myself sitting with families who were staring at the same terrifying road I had just walked. I realized that my pain was not a liability. It was a credential. I knew what it felt like to be the person in the chair. I knew the terror of the diagnosis and the exhaustion of the caregiving. I transitioned into hospice support. It was not depressing. It was profound. I worked alongside Elena Ward, the nurse who had guided me through Logan's End. We became a team. I helped families navigate the paperwork, the logistics, and the impossible emotional terrain of saying goodbye. I turned my grief into a map for others. I did not romanticize it. I did not tell them it would be okay. I told them it would be hard, but they would survive it, and in my personal life, the silence of the house began to fill up with a new kind of noise. Marin did not leave. She had planned to stay for a week after the funeral, but a week turned into a month, and a month turned into a lease on an apartment 10 minutes from Maple Hollow. She got a job at the local library. She became the sister I was supposed to have. Sunday dinners became our ritual. Marin would come over, usually bringing a bottle of cheap red wine and a story about Logan that I had never heard. She told me about the time he tried to build a raft to sail down the creek and ended up sinking 10 feet from the shore. She told me about how he used to defend her from bullies on the playground. We laughed. The first time I laughed a real, chest-shaking laugh over a burnt roast chicken, I felt a sudden spike of guilt. It felt illegal to be happy when he was gone. Marin reached across the table and grabbed my hand. "He told you to," she said, fierce and soft. "He told you to laugh. That is the deal." So I laughed, and slowly, the guilt receded, replaced by the warmth of healing. Marin was not a replacement for Logan, nor was she a replacement for Brianna. She was something entirely new. She was family chosen in the trenches. Then there was the money, the $500,000, the number that had turned my parents into strangers and my best friend into a thief. When the check finally cleared, sitting in the account Logan had protected for me, I looked at it for a long time. I could have bought the condo. I could have bought a new car. I could have gone to Paris. Instead, I called a lawyer a good one, not the one my father used. I established the Logan Hale Service Fund. I did not want a statue. I wanted a safety net. The fund provided training grants for first responders who wanted to advance their medical certifications. But more importantly, it established a crisis grant for families of first responders who were dealing with off-duty medical trauma. It was money for the ramp the insurance would not cover. It was money for the high-protein nutrition. It was money for the experimental treatment. Every time I signed a grant check, I felt Logan's hand on mine. I was using the money they had coveted to help people they would never meet. It was the ultimate rebuttal to their greed. I kept the house in Maple Hollow. People told me I should sell. They said it was too big, too full of ghosts. But I loved those ghosts. I loved the floorboards we had sanded together. I loved the garden we had planted. I hired a contractor to fix the porch railing properly this time, and I painted the front door a bright, defiant red, but I also did something for myself. I used a small portion of the insurance money to buy a tiny, A-frame cabin on a lake 2 hours north. It was not an escape, it was a breathing space. It was a place where I could go on weekends, sit on the dock with a cup of coffee, and just listen to the water. It was a place where I could be Quinn, not the widow, not the nurse, not the survivor, just Quinn. 1 year after Logan died, almost to the day, a letter arrived in my mailbox. The handwriting was familiar. It was jagged, rushed. There was no return address, but I knew who it was. I took it to the back porch. I sat on the swing Logan had hung up. I opened it. It was from Brianna. It was not a long letter. There were no excuses. There was no, "but you have to understand." There was just a stark, stripped-down admission. I lost my way. She wrote, "I saw the money and I forgot the person. I am sorry. I know that word is not enough to fix what I broke. I just needed you to know that I know what I did." I read it twice. I thought about writing back. I thought about telling her how much she had hurt me. I thought about telling her that I forgave her, but I didn't. I folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. I did not burn it. I did not tear it up. I just put it in a drawer in the kitchen. Along with the takeout menus and the spare batteries, I did not reply because I did not need to. Her apology was for her, not for me. I had already moved on. I did not hate her anymore. I just did not need her. That was the twist I never expected. Betrayal did not destroy me. It clarified me. It burned away the relationships that were made of paper and left only the ones made of steel. On the first anniversary of Logan's death, I hosted a memorial at the house. It was not a somber affair. It was a barbecue. The backyard was filled with smoke from the grill and the sound of music. The crew from Engine 4 was there, with their wives and kids running through the sprinkler. Elena Ward was there, drinking iced tea. Marin was manning the grill, wearing one of Logan's old aprons. I stood on the back deck and looked out at the crowd. There were no empty seats. Every chair was filled. Every person there was someone who had shown up. They were the people who had brought lasagna when I couldn't cook. They were the people who had mowed my lawn without asking. They were the people who had sat with me in the dark. I tapped a spoon against my glass. The chatter died down. "Thank you all for coming," I said. My voice was strong. I did not need notes. Logan used to say that he didn't have a brand name life. He said he had a loyal one. I looked at Marin, who smiled at me through the smoke. I looked at Captain Miller. I looked at the friends who had become family. "He was right," I said. And looking around this yard, I realized that loyalty is not about blood. It is not about how long you have known someone. It is about who stays when the weather gets rough. I raised my glass. "To Logan," I said, "and to showing up." "To Logan," the crowd roared back. As the sun began to set, casting long golden shadows across the grass, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. It was not the absence of pain. The pain would always be there. A quiet companion, but it was the presence of life. I had survived. I had rebuilt. I had laughed. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that somewhere, in whatever comes after this, Logan was watching, and he was proud. Love is not a promise. It is not a text message. It is not a check in the mail. Love is the act of showing up. And if the people who share your blood will not show up for you, let them go. Open the door. Let them walk out, and then lock it behind them. Because the people who are meant to be in your life are the ones who are already sitting in the chairs. Keep living, keep building, and never, ever let anyone rewrite your story. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please leave a comment below sharing your location and your thoughts on Quinn's journey. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel Lily Revenge Stories, hit the like button, and press the hype button to help this video reach more people who might need to hear that they are not alone.